is really well rehearsed.
So yeah, I'm just going to start. Hi there, everybody. My name's Nikita. I am the GM of the Mills Fabrica here in Europe. And you know, it's an honor to welcome you all here today. I just wanted to, thank you all for coming to this discussion on planet-saving innovations. Just a little bit of info about what we do here at the Mills Fabrica is we are the official innovation partner of London Craft Week. And our main goal here in this building and where we are today is to build a community of innovators, like-minded people, of innovators and startups. And our aim is to support them through our co-working space, our retail concept space, which we have downstairs, as well as our incubator and investment fund, where we're focused on investing in companies that want to make systematic change within the fashion and agri-tech industry through innovation and sustainability. To open our discussion today, I want to welcome Anya and Lisa Armstrong from the Telegraph, and look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you, everybody. Oh, it sounds very strange. Let's sort of loop back. It's very nice to see you all here. And if we're talking about innovators, startups, this is your woman. She's ridiculously awe-inspiring. And Anya, I'm not quite sure how long you've been in business, but is it getting on for 30 years?
Let's just brush over that small detail, I think.
But the point is, Anya keeps moving and keeps innovating, and really seems to be moving strongly now towards a more sustainable model. And I wanted to ask you, when you, I mean, I don't know whether you all heard of I Am Not a Plastic Bag. Have you all heard of that? Pretty much, okay. So what year was that, Anna? 2007?
Yeah.
Were you thinking about sustainability then? Was it a coherent plan? Or?
No. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here today. We were laughing, saying we only get to see each other on events, and we're great friends. I have no idea what she's going to ask me. I'm terribly worried. But it's really nice to be here with like-minded people, because this is such an important and really important and urgent subject. So no, 2007, absolutely not. I suppose, heard the word environment. Al Gore's book had just come out, and I was sort of thinking, what does it mean? What can I do? And what can I do as an individual? Because it's quite hard to affect change as an individual when it seems like such an enormous sort of problem. So I think what was exciting about that project was when someone knocked on my door, actually, who had written a book called Change the World for 𝗬𝗵𝗴, which was a book which had 40 actions in it. People are nodding. You've read the book, well done. And they wanted to amplify some of the messages. And the first action in the book was, wherever possible, refuse plastic bags. And I had a bit of a light bulb moment, actually, because I suddenly thought, actually, I can do something about that, because I could exploit the sort of it bag formula. Do you remember that? I could, in a way, combine the idea of releasing, if you like, a designer bag, but at a price that was quite, irresistible, and a fun bag, one that had an important message, and we could plant it on the right arms, and by default there was an element of scarcity, but that was genuinely by default, and create, therefore, awareness. And I think that's what's exciting about fashion, because it's a funny world.
It's a very good platform.
It's a great platform, yeah.
When you launched it, did you have any idea that there were going to be queues around the blocks, that people would be trading them on eBay within about half an hour? And how did that feel?
So, no, in fact, I was so nervous. We had actually just taken our first round of investment in to grow the business. And I remember at my first board meeting, I went, I'm going to sell a bag for £5. And they went, we've just invested in a luxury goods company. Like, well, what are you doing? And we were like, we're going to launch it with Sainsbury's. And they're like, really? So, no, I didn't. In fact, I was so nervous. I actually had someone who was an amazing sort of philanthropist who had agreed that had they not sold, and therefore it would have been a terrible embarrassment for the brand, and therefore quite brand damaging, that they would buy them up and go and collect them in vans around the country. So that was how nervous I was. Uncool, really, isn't it? But anyway, that's where we're at. So no, I didn't. I mean, it was an amazing response. I think because everyone, like me, was sort of worrying about what they could do. We're all responsible people, right? We all want to do the right thing. I think we're all nervous. And I think we all now completely believe the science. Then I think people were really realizing it was important. So it hit a nerve, I suppose. And it then actually, to be honest, went a bit mad because, I mean, 80,000, we launched it in a sort of what we call the kind of golden circle of stores. So the sort of Colette in those days, 𝗂𝗁𝗏𝗂𝗏, the sort of Isetan in Tokyo and so on. And we sort of launched it around the world in that circle of stores. And we had an amazing uptake in terms of really sort of noisy celebs that were keen to support the cause as well. And then I really wanted to take it to, if you like, the coalface, so to the supermarkets. So we worked with Sainsbury's and rolled it around the world to different supermarkets and different territories, everywhere. I know the day that Sainsbury's launched, 80,000 people queued. I mean, it went absolutely mad and got a bit scary, actually, in a funny way, because it wasn't quite what we'd wanted. We wanted, yes, of course, it was about awareness, but, it wasn't about just trying to get a cheap bag, although I suppose that sort of was...
So it became a kind of consumer thing, didn't it? And that's the opposite of what you were trying to say.
Well, in a way it's not, though, because I struggled with that at first. Oh, maybe this is really uncomfortable and people are reselling. But actually what we were trying to do was create awareness around the subject and make it fashionable to think differently about how you consume. And so actually it did the job. And in fact, it definitely did, because when we actually then had, I think later that year, the British Retail Consortium published the figures, and I think the uptake of plastic bags went from, slightly making the numbers up, but I think about 9.6 billion down to 6 in that year. And then, in fact, Wales, go Wales, they introduced a tax on plastic bags. So actually, it did make a difference. So it was a sort of, someone once said to me during the project, you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelette. We use that in lots of projects. We're midway through the problem stages and projects these days, but it's true, actually.
I didn't know about your investors being a little bit wary of you going in for a £5 bag, but I was going to ask you how it changed your brand, because that was a very brave thing to do. Back then, and to a certain extent, even now, brands feel they can't sell something below a certain price. So even if they can produce a beautiful T-shirt for £30, Dior was never going to sell a T-shirt for £30. So what sort of impact do you think it had on Anya brand luxury label?
Well, I think good and bad. I think awareness probably was quite good. Bags, I think a lot of people probably knew us for the first time for a £5 bag. But to be honest, I don't really care. Because I think that when you're talking to a customer, and these days we're talking much more directly to customers, customers, we talk every day on Instagram to our customers. It's really exciting, that relationship. And I really believe in purpose. I really believe in authenticity. And I really give a damn. Those are my values. And so I think, actually, and I think, fun enough, they might have been brave then, but I think they're quite relevant values and modern values to do what's right. And I worry a little bit, and I'm not dissing any other brand store because I'm such a fan of so many beautiful brands, but I worry a bit that actually, when we've got less than 10 years to fix this problem, which is very, very serious. And if we think about the refugee crisis we have now, trying to rightly rehome and look after, Ukrainian, brilliant, talented people with the horrible name refugee, I hate that word in a way. But you think about the consequence of climate refugees. I mean, if you have all those really, really hot countries who can no longer, get water or grow crops, or indeed you have extreme weather, problems that we're getting all the time now, we're going to have such a displaced world. It's really terrifying. So, in a way, the idea of worrying about my brand and where it sits doesn't bother me. I actually think that we should do what feels right, and I sort of feel that actually our customers like that. So I'm sort of doing what I think is right, and actually I think it's working, and I think that we've got to do it anyway.
I mean, because you bought back your brand 2 years ago, so now you have complete freedom.
Within reason.
With it, I mean, obviously, you've got staff to pay, rents to pay, and then you decide at the end of last year to collaborate again with several supermarkets and launch the universal bag. Why 14 years on did you want to do that?
Well, I think the problem hasn't really gone away, truthfully. I mean, I think there's two things. It seems like a lot of my career has been consumed in a really good way by thinking about how we can, either awareness of single-use plastic or the circularity of materials, which are the later projects we've done. So we then brought out 𝗖𝗵𝗵 bag, this little bag here, it's made from repurposed plastic. And so, the conversation moved on to circularity, how we can keep the 8 billion tons of plastic on the planet right now out of landfill. That seems to make sense. And then in turn, and actually a real passion project of mine now, is how can we design? I mean, the fact is there is no waste in nature. An animal, when it dies, it falls down, it biodegrades, it composts, actually, or it feeds other beings and animals, and it's totally naturally circular, whereas we're having to put all the effort in to repair and to keep things moving and to recycle, and things are hard to recycle. So actually we need to think much bigger than that and think, how can we put into the design process the end of life? So we launched last year now, so confused on what time of the, I'm so COVID
2022.
Where am I? We launched a project called Return to Nature, which is, to a certain extent, a fairly academic project, but one I'm really passionate about, which is, could I make a bag that would never end up in landfill? Which is sort of answering my own question, having done all this work on landfill. And so we set out to make a bag that mimics nature, that actually is made from leather, and that's another whole subject which I'd love to crack into. I don't know if we have time today, because people always think leather's bad, and I'd love to talk about leather.
I think it is worth talking about that, because I think there's so much everywhere now about vegan leather, which is plastic. It doesn't biodegrade.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, in the research of this project, Return to Nature, it really made me do a deep dive into leather. So I wanted to make this bag that would act like an apple. When it fell from a tree, it would break down and it would compost. Okay, so I wanted to make a bag that would do the same, and we've done it, which is really exciting.
And it's very beautiful.
Thank you.
It's like a big tan tote. I don't know if it comes in other colours.
Yeah, it does actually. So we looked
no hardware.
No hardware. It's all unlined. But it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So we looked at the traceability of the skins. I'm going to come back to leather because I'm going to just set the context. The traceability of the skins, and therefore is that responsible? So we'll come back to that in a second. Then we looked at how it's tanned so that it leaves nothing in the soil when it breaks down. So we made sure we didn't work with any chrome, for example, which most leather is most lovely, delicious, touchy-feely leather. It has chrome in it, so that we don't want that. So we worked in a way where we replaced the chrome with zeolite, which is a form of clay. So it's a very natural way to tan. And then we looked at the finishing. So anyone who's wearing trainers here today, or most leather, is actually coated in a very thin film of PU, of plastic. And that's why, in the olden days, you used to have to polish your shoes once a week, and now you don't. So now they are waterproof, rainproof. If it rains, you don't get dark spots on the leather. They're sort of bulletproof. So we then had to look at a way to actually make a leather coating that would be a sort of barrier to stop it, getting rained on and dark spots and so on. And we managed to replace the PU with a natural material called activated silk. It's a new company, actually, and it's a liquid silk, really interesting. And actually, we had to slightly sort of add a bit to that, where we actually added a natural wax on top. So that's where we got to, where, therefore, what was left of the bag, when it was composted, broke down, left nothing bad in the soil, and therefore the compost actually delivered, in fact, a 20% enhanced growth in the plants that were grown from that compost with the leather in it. So it was a really lovely project. But in that research, and I could talk about all those individual bits, which I won't bore everyone this morning, but it's a real passion project, as you can probably tell. But in that research, I thought, do I work with leather? Do I work with plant leather? But I mean, why is it called leather? It's a textile, ultimately. Vegan leather, or indeed recycled leather. And
or mushroom or apple.
Yes, exactly. So a plant of some sort. And I came to the conclusion that actually leather is very misunderstood. And I'm saying this in an unbiased way because I could really have worked with anything. I don't need to work with leather. So plant leathers are interesting, really interesting, but actually there's not many pineapples grown in the UK. So it's not actually, when we have cows that are local to us, it's a wonderful pasture and incredible land in the UK for cattle. And a lot of plant leathers are actually coated in a thin film of PU to kind of make them work. Not all, but quite a lot. So they're not quite there yet. Also, to be honest, they're not actually what our customer wants. They're not very beautiful. They don't feel very sort of rich.
So this, your apple bag...
not made from an apple, it's leather.
Sorry, but the one...
A biodegradable bag.
It feels like a luxury Anya product.
Yes, it does, but we have had to make a few additions. There's no hardware. So we don't want to leave anything in the soil. And we, in fact, haven't lined the bag. Normally, we would buff the backs of the skins and we would line them in suede. But actually, in order for it to break down within a sort of a quick time frame, we need to leave the backs of the leather rough so that it would actually, the water ingress would mean it would start the biodegrading and the breaking down quite quickly. But otherwise, they're a beautiful thing. And I think it's important to make beautiful things because that's what people want. But back to leather, what's quite interesting is there's a very important point about leather. Leather, when it's good leather, locally sourced, tanned in an appropriate way, traceable to a farm that is regenerative, that actually benefits the soil health, is actually very good for the environment. And there's a lot of misinformation about cattle. And however, you can contrast that with leather that comes from a farm that is intensively farmed, where it's depleting the soil and it's becoming a desert, essentially, and therefore doesn't absorb any carbon, is incredibly bad for the environment. So my dream would be that we would actually, as consumers, be able to buy our leather goods, knowing with some sort of traffic light system, actually whether it's good leather or bad leather, because actually good leather is very, very good. So it's really, in a way, we need to really think in a very deep and sensible way about not just branding leather, which is a local resource, a brilliant fibre. So it's amazing when you think about it as a fibre, that's what it is, that actually benefits the climate crisis if it's a good farm, and benefits farmers locally. There's so many benefits to this brilliant material, so it's a much more nuanced argument.
I mean, I noticed when I was reading up about the return to nature bag last night that you stress the welfare of the animals, because as a non-meat eater, that's my final hurdle with leather. I know that it's sustainable. I know that good leather would last me my lifetime. I can pass it on to my daughters. That's a lovely thought. But it's the animal welfare now that I think about. How do you find those farms that you can really trust?
So there's a lot of amazing organisations now. I actually met, for example, with Pastures for Life. I don't know if you know, it's in one organisation. There's all sorts of accreditations, Soil Association, Demeter, there's lots of them, that will actually, you can absolutely make sure you're buying from a farm where the animal welfare is completely the best, and where they are raised, and it's a very, very strict protocol around that. So you can be certain of that. What's more difficult, actually, when we started doing this project is that what would happen is the skins actually would get mixed in. So it's, we should be using every aspect. If we slaughter an animal, we should use every aspect, from the bones to all aspects of the animal, and not waste anything. And yet the skins had very little value, and were getting mixed up with skins from bad farms. So we found this technology called spore technology, where we can actually laser tag the skins, so you can absolutely know that the bag that we are making the leather that we're making the bag out of comes from that cow with that number on his ear from that farm. In fact, there was a bit of working through all these logistics, because in fact what happens, of course, the moment you tan any skins, they cut them in half, and we actually only tagged one part of the skin, as we lost the traceability in the first batch. I mean, there's been so many learning journeys along the way.
Is it true, as another handbag designer told me once, that if the animals have been badly treated, you can see it in the leather?
Not really, unfortunately, because in fact, if you think about, we are all trained to expect a skin that is absolutely flawless. And in fact, that's an animal that's been kept inside, that hasn't had any fly bites, hasn't been sort of nicked on barbed wire. They should be, it's like a healthy kid. They should have bruises on their knees. They've been climbing trees, So actually, a perfect skin is one that's actually been, kept in cotton wool and inside. So not necessarily.
Damn.
Sorry.
So
it's good to get her occasionally.
Do you feel that one of your missions then is to make us, consumers, think about luxury in a different way? So no hardware. I mean, maybe the skins are a bit marked. I don't know, because I haven't seen this Back to Nature bag. And that we just have to recalibrate, what we think luxury is.
I think in every respect. So I now think it's an absolute badge of honour to say, and in fact today, this lovely old 𝗬𝗏 coat, which cost me a fortune at the time, and I've had for about 6 years, and I wear it until it falls off and I will mend it. There's a badge of honour to saying, I really invested in something I really, really love, and I've worn it a zillion times. That wasn't cool 10 years ago. So I think it's the same with leather goods. Hardware can be taken off and recycled, so it's not wrong. We wanted to make a really pure project, but the way hardware is often finished is often quite polluting. So it's about information, it's about digging down and knowing what you're buying from. And I think the idea of just buying a brand is not enough these days. Is what does that brand stand for? Can they prove their working conditions? And by the way, no one will be perfect, and I'm the first to put my hand up and say we're not perfect, because actually you almost can't be perfect, it's really hard. But is that brand being honest? Are they telling you what they're doing? Are they taking you on the journey? Are they learning? Is it iterative? Are they sharing the learnings from their research? I think it's about common sense, you know. I think there's more. You know, if you've ever been to a landfill site, and I really urge all of you, and also please take any children you know, just go and see a landfill site. It's so informative, and that really does sort of spur you on.
There's a lovely quote somewhere from you about how you talk about eco, not ego, industry collaboration, and shared ambition to problem solve. I mean, how much of that is a reality?
Well, I think you can, you know, of course you're all competitive and, you know, to the death. But actually, the Return to Nature project, as an example, it's completely open book. You can go on our website, you can see every single aspect, every supplier. And so I think it's, you know, I think it's the new world, you know, in the same way we're working on Universal Bag, and I know we've got to wrap up.
Yeah. I want to ask you, sorry, one more question, because this Back to Nature bag, the research into the, you know, the silk membrane, so blah, 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 to use scientific terms, sounds, you know, that all sounds like very expensive research. How do you keep the bag within the bounds of a...
Well, so I mean, that's what's great about things like today. You know, you get out there, you get interested in an area, and you collaborate, and you find someone who's doing something really interesting. It's an American company, Activated Silk, and we were introduced to them, having done everything to try and find someone who could help us solve this problem of not using plastic on bags. So you work with people. It is also really expensive. I mean, in order to prove, I mean, we did so many iterations of this leather. We finally got it right. We'd committed with matches, big launches, windows, shops. It was go. And I was doing the final wear testing, and actually, on a really, really rainy day, the bag got chickenpox. It suddenly just all went black with rain spots, and we had to go, and we'd done all the tests. Every test was £3,000 to prove that it actually did biodegrade. So it's hard, and it's really hard. Sometimes that's where it's a little bit hard. You know, do you want to share it or when you've done all the investment? But it's the right thing to do, and I think our customers get that, and I think they support us because I think they you know, hopefully trust us and believe in what we're doing.
We have to wrap up. I'm really sorry, that flew, and we haven't really talked about the universal bag properly, but it's available in a supermarket near you. And the idea is that it's guaranteed for 10 years. It's a canvas.
Even nicer, it was completely recycled material, so that's about trying to keep things out of landfill, but even nicer that it's a project where you can guarantee it will be fully recycled, because the stats are that everyone takes a bag for life once a week, and they're never recycled. So the point is you can actually turn the bag into its pocket, and it's got a free post stamp on the back, and you can put it in any letterbox. So it's launching everywhere. It's a nice project.
We could talk for ages about this. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and see you again. Hope. That wasn't really long enough.
Thank you so much, Anya. Thank you, Lisa. We're going to be doing a talk on innovative packaging with the CEO of Xampla and the chief co-founder of Shellworks, along with Pierre Paslier of Notpla. And yeah.
Chairs.
Yeah, no, we're going to bring some chairs.
Thank you. Hey, Pierre.
How are you doing?
How are you doing?
Good to see you.
Hey, Amir.
Thank you. Every week, different conference.
Let's hope it's not a golden oldies tour. This is a new talent tour.
Well, yeah, cheers, guys, again for joining us. And yeah, I guess the best way to start this off is maybe that you introduce yourself, your company, and then we can go from there. Okay.
Simon?
Okay, so I'm Simon Hombersley from Xampla. We're a University of Cambridge spin-out, and we have a replacement for single-use plastics and microplastics made from plant protein. So all plants contain polysaccharides and proteins. Sorry, you're getting the science geeks here. All plants contain polysaccharides and proteins. We're the first company in the world engineering proteins into replacements for single-use plastic. And all of us on the panel have materials that cause no harm when they hit the environment at the end of life.
Hi, so I'm Pierre, one of the co-founders of Notpla. We're a London-based startup that came out of Imperial College, and we develop alternatives to single-use plastic using seaweed. We are trying to find places where there's consumption of plastic that lasts for a few minutes, a few hours, where in a way it's really the wrong material to use. And if we can substitute that with seaweed, we could have a really good solution. So like seaweed grows extremely fast. Some of the seaweed we use grow up to 1 meter per day. And at the end of life, it's naturally biodegradable. So it's very kind of like easy for nature to break it down. And we make things like these little bubbles that you might have seen for marathons or festivals and takeaway boxes. The cool thing about this material is that it's literally edible, so you can eat the packaging at the end. So cheers. This is actually a vodka cocktail because that's what we were producing yesterday, so it's a bit early, but cheers.
Well, I'm Amir Ashrael, one of the co-founders at Shellworks. Also a kind of project that began in its life in Imperial College, London. So we founded the company about 3 years ago. And what we do is we use bacteria, so naturally occurring bacteria, to create plastic-like products that, like Pierre and Simon have mentioned, are functional and performant, but once disposed, the same bacteria that are abundant in marine and soil environments, they see this as food and they enzymatically break it down. Our main focus is on more rigid products, so we make packaging for the cosmetics and personal care space primarily. And one of our advantages here is that because it's not broken down by water or oil, and only enzymatically at its end of life, you can have products that last quite a long time, can be reused, but as soon as they're disposed, that starts the breakdown process.
Okay, great. Where are your samples?
I know. But we're starting on dishwasher tablets, and so I can't eat one of those. Also, I like to be sober at 10 o'clock.
So I guess I want to kick this off with biomaterials. So you all produce your products with biomaterials, but there is a huge, it's a very vague word, biomaterials. So what is the differences and what different types of biomaterials are there? Because there's bioplastics, biomaterials, and natural materials. So yeah, I just want to hear from you guys what you think the difference is and how you can explain it to the public.
Well, that's the most difficult question of all. I think from where you're sitting, it's very, very hard. There's a huge amount of greenwashing in the space, and there's a lot of confusion going on. And there's a first generation of what are known as bio-based materials, which are essentially backed by the fossil fuel lobby, and they represent business as usual. So it's very difficult for you to filter the enormous amount of choice and confusion and chaos. So I think what you're seeing here is we're all fierce competitors, but we are in the same category of next generation materials. So in short, if you're talking to somebody about plastic and they can't explain to you how it's natural without giving you a science lecture, then walk away. Because what we have, all of us, is materials that come from nature that we don't chemically modify. Now, there are other materials that come from nature, from sugars and so forth, which are chemically modified, and that changes what they are. They're no longer natural, and that causes microplastic or single-use plastic or packaging plastic pollution. But all of us have materials that are found in nature that we engineer without chemical modification, and that's the critical point.
Yeah, I think Anya touched on it as well as no waste in nature. And I think that's what's very unique. But I think, it's just, what do you think? I mean, how can you think we can help educate the consumer about, natural biomaterials and differentiate it from bioplastics? What is it on the packaging or the logos or the branding? How can that be clarified and made simple?
It's a tough one. I think there's like some strong efforts to fight greenwashing. There's a few kind of like pieces of legislations that are in the making that hopefully will try to like be a little bit stricter. But at the end of the day, it's about kind of like being very transparent about what your materials are. As you said, like if you don't need like a long list of very complex sounding ingredients at the back of your product, people will have like the feeling that you're a lot more transparent with them. I think that the more we push and we support those very virtuous natural materials, the more prevalent they will be in the industry. There's some really great new definitions by European Union on what is and isn't a plastic, and while this is not yet attached with like a strong ban or a tax, these definitions are starting to really trickle down. We see kind of like consumer brands asking us to really show that we are future-proof compared to these definitions of plastic. So I think that this is really helping. What is really tricky is that when you make materials, either it's mono-material or it's like a mix of different materials, and like very often materials are composed of lots of different bits and pieces. And like the industry strives on putting a certain amount of natural so that it can have this kind of label, and then the rest is the part that we don't really get to hear about. So where do we set the limit? Is it 50%, 90%, 99.9%? Where do we set the limit? And I think that's the hard bit that will have to emerge out of the next few years of like how strong we want to be on that. But at the end of the day, on the market today, you've got plenty of poly bags made from a little bit of cornstarch and a lot of like regular plastic. They will fragment because the starch is very easy to break down, so you have the impression that it kind of like biodegrades, but it just breaks down into microplastics faster. And these guys are calling this natural compostable materials. So this is a bit where we're starting today.
And do you think, I mean, like, you know, where do you think we are on that, you know, spectrum of getting to 100%, you know, natural material branding sort of thing? It's weird to say that we need a brand and a logo and a symbol to talk about the most natural thing on the planet. But do you think we're close to getting a symbol or something to verify it? Because that's the problem with consumers. They're just you know, overwhelmed with all this material, and they see the word bio and they think it's perfect, you know, but it's not. So.
I mean, I think it's a complicated landscape, as Simon and Pierre have indicated. There's been decades worth of people perpetuating a lot of misinformation. I think our somewhat optimistic view, at least, is that we know that we're working in a completely transparent way and trying to produce things that are 100% natural. So we call them natural materials because they are exactly as nature created them. The only thing that we're doing is, you know, we're taking something that's naturally created and we're manufacturing it into a product. Then at its end of life, it's going back into nature. So, you know, at Shellworks, we often say manufactured by nature, sorry, made by nature, manufactured by Shellworks. And I think it's really just has to be new companies that are driving this messaging, because it becomes a bit difficult when you're looking on packaging and seeing different comments, different symbols. And so perhaps it's really about, you know, putting the name of the company on the product and then being able to point consumers back to that, you know, company's platform, where they can really go into detail, as much detail as is needed, to explain how these things are different. Because I think it's also very much about saying what it can do and what it can't do. I think often when you see things that are kind of not necessarily so true is because they're claiming to do everything. And I think you have to be very specific about what it is and what it is not.
I think we're probably all optimistic because of people like Anya. You know, you actually are the important people in this because you have the relationships with consumers. And your relationship and your ability to educate and inform them, but also be led by them, is actually what's critical here. And I think increasingly, particularly in the luxury end of the market, we're seeing packaging choices as differentiators. And I think Anya, all those years ago when she launched her first bag, was well ahead of the curve. And with her latest effort, she's on trend there. You know, you have a role in helping us change the world because you are the ones who understand your consumers and design products for your consumers and listen to them.
Okay. And then another one is about biodegradable and compostable. You know, What is the difference and what's better, you know?
It's so hard to simplify all of these sorts of things. If you have a perfect closed loop, then recycling is fine. So in some of your supply chains, you've probably got perfect closed loop. From a warehouse through to a shop, you could probably capture the packaging there and you can work out how to recycle it. The reality is 5%, 10% of plastic in the world gets recycled. It doesn't work. So recycling isn't a solution. Home composting, or things that cause no harm when they hit the environment, is the only solution that addresses plastic pollution. Because recycling or industrial composting doesn't always work. That's the reality of it. And this is the problem. There's lots of people, policymakers and companies, trying to do the right thing, and they are. They're doing a better thing than what was going on before, but it's honestly not the solution. The solution is to make materials that don't cause pollution.
Okay, talking about pollution and carbon footprint and everything like that, how are you guys working towards like localizing your industry, you know, local for local, global as they call it, you know, how you individually, is that something you're targeting on, or are you looking to make it all in the Far East and ship it over, or what are your plans?
Yeah, definitely at scale, everything should be like with as much of a reduced supply chain as possible. In our case, luckily, there is kind of like seaweed on pretty much every coastline in the world, so there's a huge opportunity to kind of like produce things locally. And actually, 200 years ago, there was 100,000 people in Scotland who used to work in the seaweed industry, and that's been all dismantled because we moved to petrochemicals, and then everything moved to kind of like the Far East. But we actually have some really good resources here in this country for seaweed. I think we don't realize as well how much the harm of plastic is kind of like happening on a global scale outside of our control. But yesterday I was at a seaweed conference. I was chatting, I just heard that like there were maybe 7 people in the audience because it's not as kind of like maybe like mainstream as here. But like what was really interesting, like one of the kind of like leading scientists was saying that actually like because we have now microplastics virtually everywhere, and it's kind of like literally in Antarctica floating in the sea everywhere. The krills, these kind of like little shrimps that go around, and apparently there are like billions and billions of them under Antarctica that are kind of like providing a lot of ecological services. They eat that microplastic, and that makes, like, and normally they are a huge sequester of carbon, so like their poo just sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and that's a huge service that they give to like the whole of the planet. And now that there's microplastics in their poo, the poo floats, so it doesn't get sequestered. So we're losing this huge amount of like free, easy sequestration because we've put this material everywhere. So definitely like through relocalization, we will shorten supply chain and help with carbon, but directly targeting plastic and the pollution and all these kind of like things that really harm the environment is the best way of actually kind of like making sure that nature helps us doing its best to sequester carbon.
Yeah, I know actually 𝗖𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗶𝗃 is a good sequester of carbon as well, apparently 20 times more than a forest.
Yeah.
But on that as well, I was just curious, you know, are you personally having to invest in setting up seaweed farms, or is there already an industry out there which you're tapping into?
So it's a really interesting kind of like space. Luckily, there is already a big existing seaweed industry, because we don't realize, but seaweed is in our toothpaste, it's in our ketchup, it's in our beer. It's used as like a food ingredient, as a texturing agent in many, many different products. So there's already a massive kind of like production of those types of products. Those products aren't necessarily the most suitable for packaging, but certainly we can work with people who produce that, and we can work with them to tweak things so that we can get our materials. But we need to be growing the seaweed industry, especially Europe is still at the stone age of seaweed. Like Southeast Asia, 80 years ago, they started to really invest in aquaculture. Today they produce 97% of seaweed in the world. They also consume 90% of seaweed in the world because they use it for food and so on. But like in Europe, it takes 4 years to get a license to get like a seaweed farm. So there is a lot of progress that we need to do in Europe to be able to have like more resource locally.
Okay, Great, thanks. So I guess you're all on different levels of where you're beginning in your startup stage, but I just wanted to know for the audience and everyone to learn about what are your biggest learnings from having a startup in the packaging industry, and what are the blockers, and yeah, what would you like to share with the audience about moving forward on something you're passionate about?
Yeah, I think from our point of view, I mean, we're creating materials that can fit into existing manufacturing processes. Sometimes, like injection molding, sometimes there's some nuances. And I think there's a misconception that actually we hear, both from brand sides, but also from manufacturer sides, that these materials are difficult to work with, or they don't perform as well as petroleum-based plastics. I think, with a bit of patience over the last 2 years, we've got things to the stage where they actually do perform. And actually, it's sometimes often, if you want to have an exact replica of a user experience that you have in petroleum plastic, perhaps that's not going to work. But I think it's also an exciting opportunity to reimagine, what you can do. Just because the packaging industry has been one way for 50 years doesn't mean that you have to continue to do things in that way. And I think it's, for us, it's an exciting opportunity. To reimagine how we can collaborate with nature to create things that last just as long as they need to, perform as well as they need to. So from our point of view, I think that's kind of the message we want to share is don't be afraid that you can't do exciting things or what you want to do because you're limited by natural materials. In fact, there's hundreds of opportunities that haven't ever been explored.
Yeah. You've just seen a man eat some plastic. I mean, there is...
Not plastic.
Not plastic, sorry, Pierre. Not that I'm competing. We have a cookable plastic as well. So we have a stock cube that you throw into the pot with its plastic wrapper, give it a stir, and you eat your own packaging. And I think that's where all of us are at. This is opportunity. That's what packaging does for your world, is that first interaction with consumers, this delight, this joy, this magic. Let's think about the things we can do that's positive about this. And this is particularly easier in your sector because your products are about magic. It's a lot harder to think how we're going to do that for a single-use sachet on an Indonesian beach where the price point is completely tiny. That's to come. But at this stage, these relationships with consumers and this passion that younger consumers have in particular not to use plastic is an opportunity.
Yeah. One message that I think would be really helpful to get really ingrained in everyone's mind is that actually plastic is not a cheap material. We don't realize, but actually the cost of plastic on society is huge. When we buy plastic products, the market price is only about 10% of the true cost of plastic on our society. So when you're buying plastic products in your supply chains and in your products, you're basically buying something on credit, and 90% of the cost will have to be paid by all of us. So when we start realizing that the more plastic we buy, the more we have to pay this debt of loss of environmental services, we start realizing that actually this is not the best option by far. We need to invest in materials that take into account their whole from the origin to the end of life, and that's why some of these solutions are never going to be as cheap as the virtual cost of plastic today.
Yeah, I guess it's the cost of cleaning up the plastic, cleaning the litter that doesn't go away, getting that third bin to recycle the plastic, just all those little costs that no one actually takes into consideration. The government funding to make people understand about recycling plastic, all of that stuff is the cost that we don't take into account. The extra cost for the packaging of your banana wrapped in plastic, all of those little details. Yeah, I guess sort of trying to wrap this up a little bit is, what would you see the blockers are to scaling your business today? And I'd like to put that to, all of you,
Oh, go ahead, sorry. You want me to start? I think, there are all sorts of challenges to overcome, but actually none of them is insurmountable. And I think I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago. But I think what's changed is that the people who actually pay for plastic, which is the procurement managers of your companies, and are being driven very much by the consumers, and that's a complete change. And actually, I think we're seeing a world now, a real world, where in 10 years' time, there simply won't be single-use plastic, microplastics, and the packaging options that you've got will simply have been changed. So I'm actually quite optimistic for those. I think, like any business, what we need to make an impact is we need sales. And we need customers to say, fine, let's do it. Let's work together. Let's create solutions. Let's create these consumer moments. And that's the stage we're all at right now, is we want customers. We want projects. We want to do exciting things with you that take our products out to market. And it'll be relatively small scale for now. But as we work through all of these barriers for all of us, we'll then get to scale. And then in 20 years' time, we will be solving those single-use plastic sachets, 855 billion of which are made on this planet every year. It's going to take a while, but we can do that.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think it starts with champions who are not afraid of kind of like doing a slightly unusual project within your organization, taking some risk, because the first time we're doing it, we're not kind of like certain of how exactly the journey is going to look like. But it's through these partnerships, these relationships, that things really kind of like hit the market. Like these boxes, we talked with Justin 3 years ago about this idea of like replacing the thin layer of plastic that is on like their takeaway boxes, and they signed up to this crazy project. They were kind of like not afraid of like every setback that happened in the journey. And this week, we managed to hit the milestone of shipping our first 1 million boxes to them. So these things really do happen when these champions are kind of like helping us to get a shot at like making these things happen. It means that, yeah, like it's going to be a little bit of like a bit of scratching our head sometimes on how we solve things, a bit of like extra budget to make it work, because it's not going to be very efficient at first. But I think a lot of those champions, they also understand that there's a huge kind of like opportunity to be perceived as like an opinion leader. I think when we launch any product with any of our partners, they're getting kind of like tons of media that otherwise they would pay a lot of money to PR kind of like agencies to try to get in the first place. So there is, when you think of it a bit as like a flexible kind of like budget, where you invest in PR and kind of like clicks on Facebook, if you invest it on innovative projects for your packaging, you could actually get like a lot more like results.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Simon and Pierre have said completely. I think one of the things probably we want to share also is that don't feel that our capacity or our material availability is a constraint. I think all of us are in the situation where if someone that is a champion brand comes to us and says, hey, let's try to do this, and takes a punt, we will make it work. So we're about to ship 250,000 units of packaging to a brand that's decided to redo their whole range with us. So I think it just takes the belief and partnerships like that to really help drive things and build excitement in the space.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, guys. It's really refreshing to meet 3 brands with absolutely 100% natural, packaging. And yeah, for anyone online, they've got all of their Instagram handles and Twitter handles as well. Please tag them. And yeah, thanks a lot. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
And next, we're going to have one of the Mills Fabrica champions, Patrik Lundström, who is the CEO of RenewCell. He's RenewCell is one of our portfolio companies we invested in a while back, and it's one of our champions, as I was saying. And I think you should definitely check out. We've got an installation downstairs where we're showcasing the amazing materials that you guys do. Thank you, Patrik.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you. All right. Okay, thank you everyone for coming, and thanks for listening in. I'd like to start a little bit holistically on a high level. Since you're here, you're basically entering into the next big thing, I would say. That's what I feel. If you look at the macro trends of the world today, one of the strongest macro trends, if not the absolute strongest macro trend, is sustainability. There's not one world leader, there's not one CEO There's not one, let's say, organization like the UN and so forth who doesn't see how important this is. So you are in the absolute right space, and this creates the biggest industrial evolution, revolution, whatever you want to call it, because this is going to go through all industries, from transportation to fashion to food to packaging, everywhere. So this is the big thing for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. We have to have a sustainable world. I mean, that's just a fact. So just by entering into this is the right place to be. I believe in mankind. We can actually do this. And when businesses are moving towards actually sustainability, things will happen. I don't believe that politicians can do it. It's us. We have to do it. Businesses need to do it. Good thing is also that if you look at the financial community, they see it. If you have listened in to 𝗨𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗶𝗃, the CEO of BlackRock, and all other investment funds in the world today, this is the space they want to be in. So with that, I just wanted to start the backdrop on where we are, what's happening right now. Don't see it as a difficulty, see it as a fantastic opportunity, because this is what's going to happen for the next 10 years. It's going to explode. When I started in this, it was difficult raising capital. Now I have investors knocking on my door almost daily. So this is the space to actually work in. Renewcell. What we do is actually we take textiles, your old jeans, my old jeans, we put it into a process. We produce something called the dissolving pulp, which you make viscose out of. That one is, of course, spun into threads and being made into new textiles and new clothes. And that we can take back into our process again and again and again. We've shown that we can do it at least 7 times the recycling. So what we have created is circularity in textile industry. Fashion, well, fashion needs to change. We all know that. But it comes with some basic principles, and we will go through each one of those. But sustainable is not enough. When we talk about sustainability, it goes like, cotton is sustainable. But that's not enough. I mean, cotton is one of the worst crops that we have on the planet. It's huge monocultures and so forth. Let me come back to that. So sustainability is not enough. We need to think more than that. Commitment to scale. We had our colleagues here before in the packaging industry. Commitment to scale comes from brands, it comes from consumers, it comes from the value chain, downstream in the value chain. Why have certain companies been able to scale? That's because there have been a lot of commitments. Look at the automotive industries, what's happening there and what's happening in the battery sector, for example. Battery factories, gigafactories, are popping up in the world like mushrooms. You know, it's absolutely fantastic. It comes because of commitment. Lead the customer. I mean, if you look at what have happened over the last, I would say, 50 years or so, we have led customers towards polyester. The industry was actually in cotton and flax and wool and so forth. We've led them into plastics. We can lead them back to sustainability. So we need to lead the customer. Sustainability is not enough. If you look at this, conventional materials, if you look at the fiber market in the world, it's about 110 million tons. And we have 3 big fibers in the world. It's cotton, polyesters, and viscose. Cotton, huge monocultures. When you have monocultures, you need to have fertilizers. You also need to have pesticides because you get, attacks from viruses and mushrooms and insects and so forth. And polyester is, of course, pumping of oil. And then you have viscose is cutting down trees, which is basically deforestation in the world. And a lot of endangered forests is also being cut down to make room for sustainable, so-called sustainable materials. And we're coming to that. So-called sustainable, we have to be careful with that word. BCI and organic cotton. Is that sustainable? I question that, actually. It's better, yes, but it's not sustainable. we're still having huge monocultures. We still need to use pesticide and fertilizers. And we're using still a lot of water. Yes, it's better, but it's not sustainable. Recycled polyesters, what is that? Recycled polyester is normally polyester bottles that is being recycled. What you do then is you take a perfect recycling system, which is recycling of plastic bottles or polyester bottles. You take that out and you make a fleece jacket or whatever out of it. And when it's colored, you can't recycle it again. So you take material out of a perfect system, putting it into a bad system, and then you're actually, when you make fibers out of it, the number of microplastics being emitted when you wash those clothes is enormous. So you're taking something good and making it bad and worse, and then you can't recycle it again. So the recycled polyester, in my mind, is greenwashing. Certified lyocells, bamboos, and so forth, that actually comes back here to the viscose. I mean, it's still clearing of huge areas of trees in the Amazons and so forth in order to grow eucalyptus and those type of materials. And just because it's certified, trees are also agriculturing. I'm from Sweden. Sweden is a huge, let's say, agriculture of woods. But it's not forests. It's wood, yes, but it's not forests. And forests are, you have branches of trees and your biodiversity because you have insects and, and all different plants living out of those trees. So we need to be very careful when we talk about sustainability. Excuse me. But this actually poses risk on the brands. I mean, the brand value. If the brands are getting caught by greenwashing, your brand value is in danger. Margins, of course, then being eaten, and then the market share is going down, and finance is going to be difficult unless you are true to your sustainability. And regulations are coming. EU have now already stipulated a law that by 2025, all member states need to collect textiles. And they are not supposed to be put on landfill. And I ask myself, what are we going to do with all that? We can recycle some of those textiles, but not all. And it's going to be huge amounts. And of course, then you have talent acquisitions. People want to work for companies that are true to their values. So, we're trying to make fashion circular. So what we do is we take your old jeans, my old jeans, shirts, everything, buttons, zippers, what have you in there. We put that into our process. We then sell dissolving pulp, and we make a cellulose fibers, viscose, and that's being sold then to yarn spinners, fabric producers, and then it goes back, and we can take that back over and over again. So we're creating circularity in the fashion industry. So what it looks like is this. This is our stock. We only use 100% textiles, cotton-rich textiles in our process. And then we're shredding that down to small pieces, and then we're making a pulp out of it, we're drying it into these sheets, and then we make fiber production. So Circulose is a dissolving pulp made from 100% textile waste, and we can use that to make staple fibers or filaments. I'm sorry. I've got some allergy, actually. So we can make viscose, lyocell, moda. Can I have a glass of water? Is that? So yes, we can make viscose, lyocell, modals, acetates, and other types of man-made cellulosic fibers out of our material. So we have proven that recycling of clothes actually finally works. So this is a launch that we made with Arket. That's a fleece jacket. We made it to last. Levi's, we've made several launches with Levi's. This is crazy. To London, I've had a couple of these attacks, actually. You're a little bit ahead of spring than us in Sweden. I'm actually wearing Levi's jeans today, which had 40% of circulose in them. Commitment to scale. We talked about that. This is our plant, by the way. And we're building this in Sundsvall, Sweden. We're actually recycling a paper mill, taking it down, and then building up our own process here. This was we're actually building 120,000 tons. And how much is that really in textiles? That's 240 million pair of jeans, for example. Starting this up this summer. Our plant, which we call Renewcell 1, is far from enough to close the fashion circle. We have made let's say, a strategic deep dive together with McKinsey this autumn. What we came to is that we should have, in order to sustain the fashion industry what they need by 2030, we should have 6.3 million tons. We're building 120. The fashion industry is 110 million tons today, growing to 160 million tons by 2030. If you take those numbers, we're building now 120,000 metric tons. That's 0.1% of the world market. This 6.3, if you look at the announced capacity, we have 0.4 of announced capacity for the world up until 2030. And I mean, the baseline is basically that we're going to have 0.7 of others who are going to announce more capacity increase. In that number, we are 0.36 of that 0.7. These are the supply gaps of 88%. Unless brands commit, we will not build more. I mean, we can do this. Circularity in fashion does exist. We can do this. But we need to make sure that somebody's using our materials once we build it. Otherwise, we won't do all the investments. So, brands commit, we will build. Volumes go up, the prices will also come down. We will be in the same range as other sustainably sourced materials. We will be at the lower quartile of sustainable materials. If you look at what have happened with cotton prices over the last year, it's actually up to over $3,000 per ton. We will be able to do this eventually at $2,500. Lead the customer to sustainability. Well, if you look at replacement, it's a new frontier then for brands and designers. No regret. We can replace 100% of all the viscose. We do a dissolving pulp that is exactly the same or better than that current viscose. We can also replace virgin cotton. That's no big deal. I mean, these jeans, 40% is circulose fibers. Be happy you can come and touch my jeans later on, unless you know me too, okay? But it works. We've also shown that we can do replacement of polyesters with filamentous yarns. The whole sporting goods sector is extremely interested in working with us these days, because that is mainly plastics. So, thank you very much. This is our plant here. This is scale. And with that, I mean, I again like to, just salute you for being in the right space. There's a lot of business opportunities. I'm calling myself an environmental capitalist because I think that's the fastest way of actually creating sustainability. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you, Patrik, and please definitely come speak to Patrik. Come see his installation downstairs, which Gabriella has put together. It looks amazing. And I think we're going to have a coffee break now, and then we're going to be hearing from Nick Blunden from the Business of Fashion after. Okay, thank you. Hello?
Oh, really? No worries.
Hi, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your coffee. So next on, I'd like to invite the president of the Business of Fashion. I'm a big fan, listen to the podcast on my morning runs. But yeah, you know, the media has a big role to play when we're coming to influence the culture around sustainability. So yeah, over to you, Nick.
Thank you so much. It's so funny seeing my job title written up there makes it clear how ridiculous a job title that really is. But it's such a pleasure to be here this morning. I thought Anya's talk was fantastic. Patrik's presentation was great. And apologies to Patrik in advance, because I'm going to talk about some examples of which Renewcell could have absolutely been a part. But it's a pleasure to be here. What I'm going to talk to you about for the next 15 minutes is the state of fashion. Now, the state of fashion is a report that we produce at the Business of Fashion in partnership with McKinsey that looks at the opportunities and challenges that the global fashion industry faces. We've been working on this report for the last 6 years. It's an annual report. And so the State of Fashion Report 2022 is the 6th edition of the report. And of course, sustainability plays a big part in the future of the industry. So I'm going to look at sustainability through this lens. And one of the big things that we do as part of the State of Fashion Report each year is identify the 10 themes that we think will shape the global fashion industry in the year ahead. And it won't be a surprise to any of you to know that if you look back at the State of Fashion Report since its inception, sustainability has been a huge part of the report, and indeed has been one of those 10 themes in one shape or another for the entire life cycle of this report. So in 2017, we called on the fashion industry to do more innovation, more responsible innovation to drive sustainability. In 2018, we called on the fashion industry to put sustainability at the heart of its planning process to improve its credibility. In 2019, we talked about how increasingly young consumers are getting woke about social and environmental issues, and that required fashion industries to embrace a much greater sense of purpose. In 2020, we talked about the need for a fundamental revolution in terms of materials, and we've heard a bit about that today. And then in 2021, we talked about the fact that both on the supply and demand side, there is increasingly a need for us basically to create less and consume less. Now that brings us forward to 2022. We've just published the 2022 report. And of course, once again, sustainability is a significant theme. But what we found in producing the 2022 report, that there is a need for an absolute step change with regard to the industry's approach to sustainability. And that's because, and this has been referenced in some of the talks earlier, there are at least 3 converging factors that make this absolutely, this being 2022, an absolutely critical year for the fashion industry when it comes to sustainability. Notwithstanding it's the right thing to do, by the way, there are also these factors. Regulation is an increasingly important driver of the need for the fashion industry to embrace sustainability and move towards action. In the US, the SEC has proposed rules that would require all publicly listed companies, fashion companies included in the US, to disclose emissions information about their supply chains. Not just their direct supply chains, by the way, tiers 1, 2, and 3, significant challenge. Patrik mentioned in the EU, as part of the Green Deal proposals that have been put forward, the EU will mandate or put minimum requirements about the use of recycled materials in finished products going forward, and require the use of product passports to support sustainability claims, and that will weigh heavily on the fashion industry. Lots of regulation driving this. On the investor side, again, Patrik talked about or mentioned Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest investor. Last year, he talked about the fact that climate risk is investment risk. And that very clearly created a case in which investors are increasingly pushing all companies, but particularly fashion companies, to do more about sustainability and be clearer about what the climate risks are. And then on the consumer side, we all know that for several years now, there has been increasing interest amongst consumers in sustainable fashion. That has tended to be amongst younger consumers. But increasingly, there's evidence to suggest that in a post-pandemic world, that interest in sustainable fashion is growing across every generation. So you put all those things together, and this is absolutely the time that the industry needs to act. So when we came, and here are our 10 themes for the global fashion industry in 2022, not only is sustainability one of these themes, but as you can see here, 2 of our 10 themes relate to sustainability. And we went on to say in this report that as one of the key strategic priorities for the industry, as I say, is to deliver on sustainability. And that is in contrast to talking about sustainability. Now is the time to absolutely deliver. And what I wanted to do is just talk to you about 2 of the themes that come under that strategic priority of delivering on sustainability, and they are circular textiles and product passports. So let's start with circular textiles. Most of you in this room would already know that the fashion industry is responsible for about 40 million tons a year of textile waste, most of which ends up either being incinerated or in landfill. Above and beyond that, textile processes use vast amounts of water, land, and raw materials. That's a fact. There's no getting away from that. The solution, at least in part, is closed-loop recycling, and we've heard a bit about this already because it gives us the opportunity to reduce the extractive production of virgin raw materials and limit textile wastes. Closed-loop systems, as you all know, I'm sure, use materials again and again, so theoretically they remain in constant circulation. The big challenge, as you can see here, and this is the results of a survey we did as part of the State of Fashion, when it comes to closed-loop recycling, is that in order to achieve sufficient scale, and of course in all of these things, the global fashion industry is a $2.6 trillion industry, we need scale to solve these problems. The biggest challenge when it comes to achieving scale, as you can see here, is the technological maturity of the solutions required to drive those closed-loop processes. The good news, however, and Patrik is a classic example of this, and as I say, Patrik's company could appear on here. The good news is in 2022, there are promising signs that that technology is beginning to scale, not just in one part of the closed-loop process, but as you can see here, almost right across the board. So let me just give you a couple of examples, and these examples are by no means isolated examples, are the only examples that I can give, but mechanical cotton recycling, so that is shredding of cotton fabric to create fibers that can be recycled. Historically, that hasn't really scaled. It's been mostly a manual process. The Circular Fashion Partnership in Bangladesh is now demonstrating that at scale, you can take cotton waste and that you can recycle it and make it available to put back into the system. That's happening in Bangladesh at significant scale, but it's scaling beyond Bangladesh. So the Circular Fashion Partnership are now looking at, can we do this in Vietnam? Can we do this in Indonesia? That's beginning to scale. But as you probably know, one of the challenges that's held back recycling of cotton has been it's very difficult to take finished articles, finished garments, and recycle them. And again, we're beginning to see innovation at scale in this space. So Novatex, in partnership with the Hong Kong Research Institute for Textiles and Apparel, have developed something called the Billy system, which enables them to automate the sanitization, sorting, stripping out of hardware, and recycling of finished cotton garments. And they can do this now at a scale that enables them to process tons of cotton fabric each and every day. One of the other things holding this system back, though, is that, of course, garments increasingly aren't just cotton. We have blends. And one of the challenges is how do you separate, for example, cotton and polyester? Hard to do at scale. Again, there are examples of companies that are now beginning to do this at significant scale. 𝗬𝗀𝗄 is just one of those examples. Turkish jeans company, again, working with the Hong Kong Research Institute for Textiles and Apparel to use their green machine technology, which enables on an automated basis to strip out cotton and polyester, break the cotton down, break the polyester down, and strip it out, and do that at an automated scale of thousands and thousands of tons. And this is really, really critical for the industry to get a grip on this problem. But of course, it's not just, if you think about closed-loop systems, it's not just about the recycling of the actual material. Scale has to happen right the way across that loop. Collection and sorting has historically been a big problem here. That is manual as well. You know, you can see here piles of clothing. If you have to sort those manually, that is a real bottleneck on the system. Sysav, another Swedish company, opened a factory in 2020 that enables the automated sorting of that clothing for recycling at an industrial scale, and that's just one example. Once you've solved that problem, there's another potential bottleneck in this system, which is how do you connect supply and demand? Interesting that the Sorting for Circularity project is working on a digital platform that will connect recycled supply with the brands who demand it to reuse it. If you can do that at a global scale on a digital platform, that takes away some of the bottlenecks. Now, experts in this space, and I'm sadly not one of them, will tell you that that's all great. But for closed-loop recycling to really scale properly, we need to reimagine the way the design process works for fashion. And the good news is, even there, we're beginning to see some changes happen. So the 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗲 Foundation has a project called the Jeans Redesign Project, which encourages designers to build circularity right into the design process. Much easier to recycle stuff if it's built into the process from the beginning. And 80% of the brands as part of the Jeans Redesign Project, of which 𝗬𝗏𝗀, who I mentioned earlier, is one, are now building circular principles into the designs of their clothes. We are making progress here. It is a long, long way to go to embrace a fully closed-loop fashion system, but we're beginning to see signs of scale, absolutely critical, at every element of this. There was another thing in the 10 trends, for those of you who looked at those trends, that you will notice, and it talked about product passports. Why am I talking about product passports? Because increasingly for the industry to change, we also need to look not just at the supply side, but at the demand side. And the industry needs to do a better job of demonstrating progress on sustainability to consumers. And that's particularly true for the younger generation. And product passports, which can transparently share information on a product's sustainability credentials, is a really important part of this. And that information could include stuff about products' materials, how it's made, and things that go beyond sustainability, like working conditions of the manufacturer. Product passports from an industry perspective can do a number of interesting things, but when we asked executives in our survey what the most important role of product passports would be going forward, it was about traceability of product materials and supply chain. Again, the big challenge here is we've talked about product passports for a few years in one shape or another. Does it really scale? And again, the good news, some examples of product passport technology really beginning to scale. So digital twins, where you can take a physical garment and create a digital replica of it, and that digital replica can be updated in real time with information about the provenance of a garment. Aeon have a really interesting platform in that space. Another way of doing that same thing with a slightly different technology, QR codes, so FiberTrace, which is a blockchain company, working with Reformation to use QR codes to enable Reformation to share information about the life cycle of their denim products. The challenge around these things is really, in order to get scale, you need some common standards. So it's great to see some common standards emerging. At the bottom there, you can see 𝗬𝗵𝗄, Richemont, Prada, and others working as part of the Aura blockchain consortium to create an environment where digital certificates can be created for products across multiple luxury brands that give information about who owns the product, how it was created, and what materials are used. That is a closed private platform. There's also some similar things going on in the open source space, and arguably, if you really want this to scale, open source is a more scalable solution. So NFT company Ariane working with IBM and companies like Breitling to create NFT-based digital product passports that contain information, some of which is sustainability information for key products. So again, we're really beginning to see scale here. One of the things that's held this back over the years is just the price, the cost of this stuff, right? It's costly enough to produce garments. If you then start having to embed them with technology, becomes even more expensive. Well, I can tell you that as a result of this stuff scaling, the cost of an RFID tag has dropped by 80% over the last 10 years. Needs to keep coming down, but as these things scale, they become much, much more accessible. Now, we talked about the State of Fashion report, which we published at the back end of last year. Since then, we've also produced an update to this report called the State of Fashion Technology Report, which came out at the beginning of this month. It looks at the role that technology will play in solving fashion's biggest challenges over the next 5 years. We love themes, has 5 themes, couldn't stretch to 10 this time, but there are 5 themes. One of them, this bottom one here, is very specifically linked to sustainability, and it's about traceability. So I just wanted to touch on that quickly. So we believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, traceability will be key to unlocking fashion sustainability challenge. Now, you again will probably know this, but it's worth just reiterating. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions alone, the fashion industry accounts for 2.1 billion tons a year. It's 4% of the global total. Everybody knows this is a problem in the fashion industry. The challenge is getting your head around how you actually deal with this problem, because if you look here on the right-hand side, you will see this is a breakdown of where those gas emissions are coming from at a sort of aggregate level. Fashion supply chains are incredibly complicated, and those emissions, of course, are being created not just as a direct outcome of what the fashion brand is doing, but all the way along that supply chain. So 50% of fashion decision makers say that traceability will be a top 5 enabler to reduce emissions in the supply chain by 2025. Now, again, bit of a theme here. The good news is we are a long, long way back in terms of traceability around things like emissions. But the good news is, again, and I'm an optimist, as you can tell, we're starting to see signs again that this is beginning to scale. So examples of common standards emerging, which are really, really important in terms of the scalability of traceability. So, for example, brands or businesses like 𝗬𝗵𝗃 and Caring and Inditex, amongst others, joining the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which means there is a common standard now, at least, for talking about emissions and measuring those emissions. That is progress. We're also seeing significant technological advances. Again, these are just representative. There are many, many more examples, but take something like Textile Genesis, working with Lensing, to be able to use digital technology to identify whether individual fibers come from sustainable sources. It's just incredible that this can be done on an individual fiber basis. Another example, Trust Trace, working with Adidas, amongst others, to create a database that stores the certification claims of suppliers and retailers and manufacturers, enabling companies like Adidas that have long supply chains and work on a global basis to properly track the emissions coming from various parts of their supply chain. And then again, I talked about open source as a critical component of building these things at scale. Interesting to see companies like H&M in the form of Treadler open sourcing the due diligence that they have done on their supply chain and making it available to other companies who maybe want to use those suppliers. There's a huge amount of work required, certainly for smaller fashion brands, to try and work out which suppliers to work with if one really wants to embrace sustainability. And this open source approach to this, I think, is, again, a really interesting approach. So traceability, a huge, 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 huge challenge. I wouldn't want to give you the impression in any of these examples that we have this cracked and that there's nothing to worry about. But at least we're beginning to see signs and evidence that this can be done at scale, which, quite frankly, does not give anybody in the industry an excuse anymore to say, I'd love to do it, but it won't work for my business. So I mentioned the fact that there is a long way to go on traceability. Before I leave you, if you are interested in this stuff, I just wanted to alert you to one other thing we do at the Business of Fashion. Last year, we produced a sustainability index. And we believe that it's really important that within the industry, we're held to account against the targets that we set. I think it's human nature to be ambitious in terms of our goals, but not always necessarily live up to our rhetoric. So as an industry, we need to do better. Last year, we measured the performance of 15 companies across luxury, high street, and sportswear. These are all public companies, about how they're doing against key sustainability areas like transparency, emissions, water, chemicals, materials, workers' rights, and waste. There's some great examples of companies doing incredibly well. I've got to tell you, last year, the overall score for these companies in aggregate was pretty disappointing. We will release this report again in 3 weeks' time. It's expanded. It will now cover 30 companies across those 3 sectors, and again, look at those 6 things and see what progress we're making. I think Patrik, or it might have been Anya, talked about the fact that it's not about perfection, but it's absolutely about making significant progress. And we believe that in 2022, the industry has to make really, 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 really significant progress. And we'll be using this to see how we're doing. I think that's everything I've got time for. I hope in some respects you found that interesting. Again, apologies to Patrik. 𝗏𝗏 could have been on my list of examples. I will update this presentation to include that. But in the meantime, thank you all so much.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Looking forward to seeing the momentum on all of that. Next up, we've got Nick, well, two co-founders, Nick from 𝗏𝗏, and we've got Walden from Unspun, who's actually one of our portfolio brands and also showcasing downstairs in Fabrica X. And we've got our very own resident of the Mills Fabrica, Mary Fellows, founder of Green with Studio, who's going to moderate the talks. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Nikita. Hi, Steve and Walden. Thank you for coming. So we're really looking at what we thought about Back to the Future with both of you guys. And as we've just heard from Nick, that technology obviously is going to be one of the really key ways that we can solve the sustainability crisis in fashion. So starting with Steve, 𝗏𝗏. Who here knows about 𝗏𝗏? Anyone aware of what they do? Yeah, good. Okay, so, okay.
Pretty confident I do.
I said to Steve this morning, can you just tell me, like in a few words, what is 𝗏𝗏? And he goes, oh, it's too expensive. It's just, that's it. We went deeper into it, and we discovered that they're making literally clothes for the future. Clothes you could go to Mars on. Clothes that will help us when the inevitable floods and fires and heat and megastorms come. Clothes that outlive you, clothes that are made from both waste streams as well as from nature, and a hood that helps you sleep. I'm going to let Steve continue. And what I really wanted to ask you was, what problem did you set out to solve in the fashion industry and sustainability, and how have you done it?
We didn't really set out to solve the sustainability issue, I'll be completely honest. We were racing ultramarathons around the world, and we'd been told just how advanced clothes were, and I was doing some work with Adidas at the time. And basically, when you start racing across deserts and through jungles, actually clothes aren't that advanced. Lots of them made out of polyester and cotton and elastane and spandex, and it's kind of the same stuff, just with different brand logos. And we started thinking about, could clothing start to solve different problems? Could it help you relax? Could it help you sleep? Could it light you up at night? And then it was only really over the last 5 years, as we started building the brand, that we've really started to think very concretely about lots of problems that it could solve. So we now tackle climate sustainability, space exploration, and human health. So we built the first jacket made out of copper. We built jackets for Mars that come with their own vomit pockets when you puke, when your vestibular system goes crazy, when you encounter lack of gravity. And then from a sustainability angle, we really just focus on really 3 key streams, which is stuff built from garbage streams, stuff built from nature, and clothes designed to outlive you. Ultimately, our plan is that these 3 will combine. But those are the 3 we felt we could actively attack really strategically, as opposed to just sort of, make it out of slightly better made cotton, say the word sustainable a couple of times on our website. So we're quite sort of, pretty articulate, and we talk a lot about, the problems we have.
Yeah.
But those are the 3 ways we tackle sustainability at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Walden, over to you. I think we have these images coming up shortly. Now, Walden is the vision behind Unspun. Has anyone here heard of Unspun? Yeah, okay. So as those of you who know the brand will know, they make custom denim that's made to order using this incredible robotic technology. I call it robotic. I'm sure he'll have a better way of saying it. And you also partner with other brands, which enables them to make custom denim for their customers and audiences. And Walden, over to you. What was it you wanted to do in fashion? What kind of problem did you see in the industry that you felt that your brand could solve?
Yeah, I think we set out to talk about an issue that's a little bit like a taboo within the fashion industry. I think now that the narrative is a lot about the materials, and I think we wanted to think about garment waste I think when you think about the fashion brands and how the narrative is going, it's very hard for them to talk about fashion garment waste in particular, because it's such intrinsic in the business model. And so what we set out to do was to do on-demand fashion. And so there are a couple of complementary technologies that we're trying to do. The body scanning customization is one part of it. And then the other part is this 3D weaving machine that we take yarn and three-dimensionally create the garments that would enable onshore manufacturing and on-demand production from the perspective of not having to waste a lot of the fabric waste.
Okay, thank you. With the sound here. And you mentioned the scanning technology. How does that work?
Yeah, so we have an app on the App Store that you can download. It's called Unspun. Essentially, it's a 10-second process. We use the depth sensing inward-facing camera that you unlock your phone with Face ID on. And then we essentially handle everything on the back end, and avatars generated. We apply a bit of machine learning to create the patterns, and then turn around the products within 2 or 3 weeks to the end consumers.
Only 2 or 3 weeks. And with both of you, question for Steve, and then we'll ask Walden as well. What have been the biggest hurdles and challenges around deploying technology to enable you to do what you wanted to do with the brand?
So most of the time, it's factories just saying no.
Okay.
So they just say it's literally too complicated. So as soon as you start working with materials and processes that break the supply chain, you're just met with the walls of no everywhere. Now, I think what was particularly fascinating about that is before I did clothing, I worked in advertising for a very long time, where clients just tell you no all the time. So I'm quite used to hearing it going, well, that's not actually true. We're going to crack on anyway. But that is really the single biggest challenge, which is, I think whether you're Nike or a very small company like us today, suppliers have to go on that journey with you, and they have to be willing to. And the minute you start doing silly things, I'll give you a really silly example, is we made a plant and algae t-shirt. And in order to do that, we had to leave the plant substance, which was pulped eucalyptus and beech, completely raw. And then we were going to, you couldn't get algae dye at the moment, so people are working on it, so we had to use algae ink. And then you've got to persuade someone who owns an ink printing machine that's worth about 100 grand.
Yeah.
You just dump a bunch of algae in that, please. And they just go, no, we can't. So you literally have to go around the world finding someone risky enough to put algae ink in their really expensive printer.
Yeah.
And so even just doing really simple things like that end up with incredibly real-world problems.
Yeah.
Because you can't become so vertically integrated that, well, we'll go build the 100-gram printer because we just don't have that much cash.
Yeah.
And so that's the actual issue you fundamentally come up against, which is you have to take parts of the supply chain with you, and some want to go and some don't. That's the real-world problem we face.
That's interesting. And Walden, how about you? What have been the kind of hurdles or big challenges to solve in deploying technology to take the brand forward?
Yeah, I resonate a lot with what Steve mentioned. I think my only example there is, like, in the early days when we're trying to convince manufacturers to produce on demand for us, they said fabric cutting is too hard. It's not done at scale. So what we did was Beth and I went to lease a laser cutting machine, and we just cut out the pattern after the scanning is done. So every batch is hand delivered by us to the manufacturer, and then they sew them up in the sample room. And then once we've proven that that model works and they're sharing a greater value from the production that they have, then it becomes more of a thing. I think the other aspect is what was touched on early on today is this scaling of production. A lot of us are talking about scale. With innovators that touch on materials, there's like a valley of death where you have like a fiber that comes out of a lab, and then to the point where you can satisfy the demand of all the fashion brands out there that are asking for hundreds of thousands of units, millions of units. The scale that you need to kind of reach overnight to be able to produce in an industrial manner, like essentially what Patrik is doing, like that valley of death, actually there's quite a bit of innovators that die along the way. So I think that's also quite tricky.
Okay. So we've looked at some of the hurdles that you faced in being able to embed craft and technology to take your brands out there. And what else, if you had, both of you had a magic wand that you could be given to change the industry, change regulation, change technology, change consumer behavior, what would you do to change the industry to make it a better place? Steve, let's hear from you.
What a brilliant question. I wish I'd prepared for that. So I think actually the industry is heading in the right direction. So I think it's really easy to look from the outside perspective, and I have no idea if Nike are doing well or not. It's so hard running a startup. I have no time to look at what other people are doing. However, I needed some tennis stuff the other day, and I went on their website, and I was getting offered tennis stuff, and it's like, pages and pages of stuff, and then one popped up, and it said, made from sustainable materials. And that was it. And you just kind of go, well, what does that mean? Like how? Why? Who's judged this?
Yeah.
And so I hate regulating industries. I think it's a really, really disastrous idea. And I think ultimately, because the climate crisis is so huge, these things will regulate themselves over time. My magic wand, I'd speed that process up. In the same way, sort of AI should be regulated now before we sort of all get killed by robots.
Yeah.
You would regulate how people are allowed to talk about this and how much people understand it. But that's my magic wand, would just kind of accelerate the process.
Okay.
I don't think there's one cure-all. I think it's that both sides. You have to have consumers asking for it, which I believe the younger generation are more likely to, and you have to have brands doing it. But speed is the one thing I'd change.
Okay.
And then this, for instance, is like one of our sweaters. It's made entirely out of garbage, so it's basically mashed up, recycled, bulletproof vests, which basically sit on the garbage dump for like 1,000 years because they're designed to be indestructible, so we're making new clothes out of them. Oh. That was hard. Every factory in the world said no to that.
Did they?
Yeah, literally everybody said no. So that's my magic wand. I'd make factories say yes all the time and then figure out a way to do it.
Just get rid of the word no.
They just go, yes, we can do this, and then figure out a way, because that was super tough.
So your bulletproof vest is made out of recycled materials that are garbage. And tell us a bit more about, because you've got copper and your carbon T-shirt. Tell us a bit more about the materials and the craft of some of your pieces, because I think they sounded so fascinating when I read about them.
We were chatting a little bit earlier about, I absolutely loved 𝗬𝗓𝗏, and he's just so completely crazy. And two of our other heroes are 𝗍𝗓 Redzepi and Bjarke Ingels. So 𝗍𝗓 runs Noma and Bjarke runs Big, the architecture practice. And we've basically spent 5 years being really obsessed with materials. Materials are cheaper than kind of like doing anything else. Like ultimately, we're going to be sort of combining clothes with data and robotics, but that's actually quite expensive. So for the moment, we can just work with the craziest materials on Earth. So this stuff's made out of like hemp and algae. This is made out of ballistic nylon. So that over on the right there, that's our jacket for Mars with the 3D printed vomit pocket, which comes with a vomit bag inside it.
I actually bought this.
Yeah. Have you puked in it yet?
No.
No, good.
And what is ballistic nylon?
Well,
it sounds amazing.
Ballistic nylon was invented in World War II, but essentially what we do is we go and look at all the craziest materials in the world, and then we go, how could we use them for really cool ideas? So yes, it takes us from copper to algae to ceramics to graphene, but this is why we encounter so many no's. Because if you want to make 1 million T-shirts in China out of cotton tomorrow, you'll have them in, 7 days. I've never done it, but I'm assuming it's quite quick.
Yeah.
And if you want to do any of these things we're doing, it's 1.5 years. Because it's just so hard to source these things, get all the techniques to make them, and just persuade people to do it. That's the really tough thing. But yeah, lots of materials in order to solve different problems that we don't think have been addressed very well before.
Okay, that's interesting. And Walden, what about you? How else does, we're here to talk about craft this week. We've got your brand, which has got this incredible technology, both the scanning and then the weaving. Do you think that's the future of craft? Using that kind of technology?
One of our engineers says it best. I think that the technology that we create, it has to make the human processes better instead of completely replacing the humans. I think with the magic wand question and the tension between sort of design and technology is this inconsistency with like the urgency that we're communicating. Like as we speak in India, it's like 43 degrees. Parts of India, it's 43 degrees Celsius. Like we are really running out of time. But as we live the day-to-day within the fashion industry, a lot of times when we talk about organizing a meeting, it takes 3 weeks to just organize the meetings and like 4 weeks to do an NDA. Like we're like massively running out of time. So this adoption of technology really needs to speed up in unprecedented pace. Yeah.
Okay. And then where does, if I don't know who here has been reading all about the kind of energy around data mining and things, but do you guys ever come across that kind of slight conflict of like, if you use a lot of technology, that uses a lot of energy, is that still efficient from an emissions point of view when you're using a lot of technology to take your brand forward?
I think it really comes down to whether you hold yourselves accountable. It's not just talking about sustainable materials, like organic cotton, boom, sustainable. Like you do life cycle assessments to make sure that your end-to-end process is there, that you're actually making an impact. That's probably also a better question for the last panel today about metaverse on using energy with respect to data mining. But yeah, I think at least on Spun's behalf, we try to hold ourselves accountable with life cycle assessment to make sure that we're not just greenwashing.
Okay. And also on to, we heard a lot from Nick now about, in the last talk, about closed-loop manufacturing. And how possible is it for both of your brands, Steve, let's start with you, for customers to send their pieces back, have them reused again? Have you managed to embed that, or is that kind of in a further phase of the journey of the brand?
Well, we're really nice. So our original approach was basically, what if we combine really high-end technology with really friendly customer service? So from if you have anything wrong with your thing, we'll repair it, we'll replace it, we'll do anything you need. Our idea was basically, you should have that piece of clothing for the rest of your life. I mean, one of the reasons we did that is we started off with a piece called the '100-Year Hoodie, which was designed to outlive you. As a business model, it's awful. It's absolutely almost designed to bankrupt you. However, we kind of, we're 5 years into the journey, we're not bankrupt yet. And so we kind of decided, well, actually, it's probably working. And what you tend to find is that the people who buy into clothing that should last a lifetime are kind of really interesting consumers, and they spread the word for you. I can't remember your question, but what was
No. Just generally whether closed-loop manufacturing or embedding circularity is something you're really kind of linked with. It sounds like you don't necessarily need to.
No, it is something we'll explore. I mean, the way we kind of think about it is at our scale, and I presume the same is true for Walden. Like, we're not on the FTSE 100, but it's not some kind of huge brand. So all we really look at is, if what we're doing today, if that was done at scale, would that be better than what exists in the massive companies? And if it is, then we do it, and if it's not, then we don't. But yeah, there's huge amounts of inefficiency as a small company. Making some crazy material just to make 200 jackets is kind of madness. However, the argument is, or the plants, the sort of hemp and algae would be a great example. You make 1 million of those, that's a much, much better alternative to some of the other t-shirts you'll see on the market. So yeah, massive inefficiency at our size. But if you the account we hold ourselves up to is, if this was done at scale, would this work? And yes, it would. Okay.
Very interesting and very inspiring. And Walden, what about you? Does closed-loop manufacturing and circularity feature heavily with your...
Yeah, today there has been a lot of discussions around denim, and I think denim kind of, it leads the way in terms of circularity, because I think visually it's such a polluting category, and there's just a lot of work that goes into thinking about circularity. So we're part of the 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Foundation Jeans Redesign Program, and so our buttons are removable, so that at the end of life you can just push them out, reuse them. And then we partner with this company in Belgium called Resortex. The stitching thread fuses at a lower temperature. We can recycle. We use the fabrics that come out of that. And then we use 99% cellulose-based materials and do durability tests on our products. Have recycling partners across the 3 continents that we operate in. So yeah, I think a lot of these things are just table stakes. I don't think that we are unique in that.
No, absolutely. And thinking about how we've got this dilemma, particularly in the fashion industry, at sustainability, when it comes to Gen Y and Gen Z, who are very much driving consumer demand around sustainable clothing. But by the same token, a lot of them want a lot of clothing very frequently for new content that when they're on TikTok or Instagram stories or whatever. And so you've got this dilemma of the kind of behavior attitude paradigm. And how do you guys feel about how do you promote the idea that you can just buy 1 or 2 or a few things that will last, and that it's easy for men to do that, but for women, how do you talk to your customers when they may have a desire to update their wardrobes, have new things, and consume? Do you have those conversations with your customers? Steve, you first.
Well, I find the conversation like super ironic. There's a really famous Patagonia ad they ran, which was "Don't buy this jacket," and obviously the Patagonia is not share price because it's privately owned, but like their revenues went up significantly after telling customers not to buy stuff. So there is kind of like a really, so the whole kind of system is a little bit flawed. Yeah. So what was your question like?
How can you guys and how can the industry also encourage consumers to think that, like, in a climate when we're used to being able to swipe right, get new stuff all the time, and this, men do that less than women on the whole. Yeah. But how can you persuade your customers and other customers out there in the wider industry that it is okay just to buy one or two or just a few things and make them last?
You've got to tell better stories. So when we came into the industry, one of the things I was absolutely fascinated by, I don't want to pick on North Face, I've owned loads of North Face stuff, but you go on a jacket and it's called, VFX 1000, and it lists the tech spec, and that's it. That's all you find out. And I was always fascinated that, in every garment, thousands and thousands of hours of work has gone into it, and then they didn't tell you anything about it. And I was just really intrigued about why not. So when we first started, there's lots of problems with our website, and we're redoing it in the next 2 weeks. But what we do is we tell really long stories. This long. It takes you 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes to read them. Really? We just tell you everything about it. Okay. And then you're either into that or you're not. Yeah. That's okay. And so it weeds out people who kind of want to just kind of like swipe. And people who are really into the story will do it better. But that's the thing that I think will really dramatically change it, is storytelling. A lot of storytelling of, whether it's sports brands or fashion brands, has been superficial. Yeah. Over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. This person looks beautiful, your life could be a bit like them. That's not storytelling. That's just kind of image making and making your sort of limbic system go, I really want to be this person. And I think we need to really see a radical shift. Well, we don't, but it'd be nice if we did see a radical shift towards, why have you made it? Why is that important? And that's what we'd like to do.
And what about you?
Winding you up, aren't they?
I think we need to wrap up now. We could carry on for hours. Walden, lastly to you, how do you feel about the idea that to try and change consumer behaviour and that sort of attitude paradigm about consumption?
I think you just need to make a very compelling product. Like it's a bit like delicious food, or like thinking the iceberg principle, where you make a product so compelling that you do everything to make that the better product in terms of sustainability, impact, circularity. But then it's so compelling that by choosing the right thing, you're guiding the consumer to make the right impact. I think that's kind of the only way. You can't preach consumers into behaviors.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up for there. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Guys. So next up, we have 𝗪𝗏 Crespin, the co-founder and CEO of Reflaunt, who's redefining luxury fashion.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. It's such a critical subject, so urgent. And thank you, the Mills Fabrica, for organizing this event and bringing us together. So today I'd like to talk to you about resale and how resale can be a powerful tool and motor to fuel the growth of the fashion industry in a sustainable way. By rethinking our traditional linear model into a circular one, how that can lead to not having us to make a trade-off between profitability and sustainability. So at Reflaunt, we aim at extending the product life cycle of products while increasing the profitability of products through brand-powered circular ecosystems. So before we jump into how we empower brands through resale, I'd like to have a look at the state of the resale space. So what you see here is, no surprise, the second-hand market has been exploding over the past few years, 10 years overall. And you see a multiple of different players that have appeared on the market with different models. And just last year, we've seen phenomenal players reach multi-billion-dollar valuations. However, When you look at the numbers, we're only scratching the surface, right? And only the tip of the iceberg is uncovered when it comes to the penetration of resale. Only 5% of what is actually resellable, and when I say resellable, it's pieces, fashion pieces that are sitting ideal in people's wardrobe and, being unworn and could be resold, is actually being transacted or being resold on the market. So we still have 95% to unlock. So how are we going to accelerate the penetration of resale and increase the adoption of circular consumption, right? And at Reflaunt, we strongly believe that brands, or the entrance of brands and retailers in the space, can be part of the solution. So here, the good news again is that we've been seeing many brands, many retailers identify this opportunity and enter the space. And I'd like to talk to you about why we believe that these brands and retailers will accelerate. Sorry. Is it not? Well, someone helps me. Thank you. So the first reasons why we believe that brands and retailers will accelerate is that one of the major pain points when it comes to resale is the friction around the whole process of reselling products, right? I'm sure all of you have gone through that process. You have to take your piece, take pictures, the description, and so on, right? You don't know what price you want to sell it. You need to inform yourself on what optimal price you can get out of it. So that comes down to basically a major pain point and a major friction when it comes to resale. If you think about it, brands and retailers actually have all of that for you, right? They have taken the pictures at a moment in time, and they have the digital passport or the product passport that is readily available. The second big friction is around authenticity. Secondhand is unfortunately, crippled with counterfeits, and that impacts the trust around that space and reduces the conversion around secondhand purchases. And then the third is everything that is related to operations. So we're talking about unique pieces having to be digitalized, photographed, etc., which can be quite heavy when it comes to circular models. So basically the infrastructure and the need for investment in a new supply chain can also be a key hinder. So at Reflaunt, what we do is that we ignite growth of the industry through brand-powered circular ecosystems. And the way that we do it, is that we've built a very simple model in which we integrate on one side with the brands and with the retailers, simplifying the whole resale process. And on the other side, we have integrated with multiple different partners and marketplaces. So today we are integrated with about 27 marketplaces worldwide. So how does it work? You've purchased this hourglass Balenciaga bag 6 months ago, and you decided that you want to put it on sale because it's too heavy, or unfortunately you don't have sufficient use out of it. You go back to your account with the brand, so in this case it would be Balenciaga, and you have all your historical purchases. And next to that historical purchase, you have a resell button. You click resell, and that triggers 3 pop-ups. But 90% of your product listing is created for you. There's the pictures, the material, the description. There's even information of the sustainability or the footprint. There's even information of when you purchased it and what priced. So all that information is going to be the base of your listing, and you just add additional information related to the condition, the actual condition of the product, and the price at which you want to sell it. Then that product listing is simultaneously posted across our network of marketplaces. So I get listed on marketplaces like Hardly Ever Worn It, like Vestiaire, like Rebelle, like Minto, many different marketplaces worldwide that all attract different types of shoppers and audiences, some looking for sneakers like on Goat, or some for premium, affordable luxury like on eBay. Once the product has been sold on one of these marketplaces, the initial shopper gets to be paid either in cash or shopping credits to buy again with the brand. So essentially what we're building is a circular model to drive retention, loyalty, and repeat sales with the brand. This is an example of an interface so that you get an idea. And as you see, it's really integrated in the interface of the brand, and you have that resell button that's right below all the purchases that that customer has made. So if we decouple kind of both sides of the equations, one is that we source inventory through a white label RAS directly through the brand. So we integrate with the brand so that they can control basically the customer experience, the data, and the narrative. All the products are also directly sourced through the brand, so through real customers. That also enables traceability of the product, being able to guarantee basically the provenance of products, because we know that that customer is actually a real customer of the brand and has bought at the official source. And we convert the value created on the second-hand market into new purchases for the brand. On the other side of the equation, we sell the inventory through a network of marketplaces. The brand, by the way, or the retailer can't be part of that network, right? So they can choose to be one of the distribution channels to sell their product. It can be done as well in a cascading way, meaning that the brand can own the resale of its products for a certain period, after which it will be resold on the rest of the network. This is critical because that unlocks sell-through, liquidity, and velocity, because at the end of the day, the whole goal of this for the brands is also to be able to create value for the customer and then to convert that into a new purchase for themselves. So I'll just go to the next. The other key, the other key element and key pillar of our approach is that we don't believe there's one model fits all for brands and retailers. Depending on their positioning, depending on their price points, different resale models are adapted. So we've built our technology in a modular way to enable 3 types of models, of solutions that can be actually used in combination. The first is the smart button. So that's really the low-touch, very efficient manner to resell, which is kind of the model that I shared previously. The second is the concierge service. So this is what we've rolled out with players like Net-a-Porter, Mr. Porter, Harvey Nichols, or Balenciaga, where there's an additional layer, an operational layer, where we help the brands digitalize the products, because unfortunately the reality of the market is that not all products have digital passports, and not all products are in the account of the customers. So there needs to be some processing around the products. Once we've collected the items and digitalized them, they're added to the account and they follow the same journey as for the resell button. And then the white label marketplace is basically building or helping the brands and retailers build their own resale channel. So what are the benefits that we help the brands unlock? Well, first, very obvious one is we close the loop on their value chain and we extend the life cycle of their products. And then we give them full visibility over the product life cycle. The second is we monetize the booming second-hand. Now, we don't give a cut or commission to the brands or the retailers. We focus on the fact of creating retention and loyalty of their customer base, and funneling back their customers to them rather than to their competition. We've reached new audiences as well, because through secondhand, you're able to tap into a different audience. And then finally, we boost customer loyalty and engagement. So last slide, our vision is really to become an infrastructure, a hardware that connects first-hand, second-hand, but beyond that, that builds or creates liquidity on the market for fashion, right? Because today, if fashion pieces don't have any value, this is how we've come to a disposable fashion industry. As of the moment we're able to reframe the value around products, then us as customers will be, or consumers will be able to look at our products or our fashion pieces as assets, right? And as we look at them as assets, we start caring for them. We also start looking at or considering our purchases a bit differently, right? We're able to maybe spend a bit more money for products that are higher quality and longer lasting. So by creating this liquidity in our wardrobes, we're actually positioning products not anymore as disposable, but assets that can be traded, that can be passed on and resold. Voilà. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for that. So next up, just before lunch, we have got Leanne and Nikita from the Institute of Digital Fashion talking about the much talked about metaverse. And yeah, welcome. Here they are.
Yeah, stand. Do we, yeah. Oh, we stand up. That's cute. Get caught on my head. Okay, amazing. We're kind of there, but that's kind of okay. We can go back if you want.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So hi, we are Institute of Digital Fashion, IODF.
Hello.
I'm Leanne Elliott-Young, CEO and co-founder.
I'm Cathy, creative director and co-founder as well.
So yeah, we're going to talk about the metaverse, the buzzword. Oh, cute! There's so many people here we know. That's nice. Yeah, the buzzword, the metaverse, but more specifically, our work in it. Right now, the majority of our work is creating the vocabulary for the metaverse for the fashion industry. So here's some nice quotes about the work that we're delivering. Nice one from Vogue here. And we've been noted as the people who are masterminding the metaverse. But primarily, the reason why we birthed IODF is because the semantics of fashion have changed so much, largely because of COVID. There was obviously a massive spike in digital. And at that point, me and myself and Cathy came together, and we really were frustrated with the fashion industry, all of the pain points that it incubates. And we wanted to build a space that was about breaking free from the old systems, the archaic structures of fashion, and building one anew. So our main point of IODF is how can we use technology as a democratic tool for change. That's not a light-hearted statement. We also note ourselves as an emblem for change. We work with the IRL and URL. That was something that we spoke about a lot. And prior to COVID, were mocked quite a bit, even to the point that some of my show tickets for Fashion Week, it actually just said IRL, URL on them, because it was a laughing point. So we work 360, so very much studio floor to shop floor. So that means working with the creatives, the design teams, and all the way through into retail, because we really believe that it is about building a new structure for the industry.
This is myself and Leanne. So this is just a page that's about where we both came from, I suppose. So I started digital fashion in 2018 when it was a very lonely place and not many people really understood what it was. And 𝗬𝗵 was working in fashion for years, strategy, and then we came together in the heart of COVID to protect the digital fashion industry, I suppose, before it really went crazy.
Yeah, and it was so funny, I've got a mild echo.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's obviously loads of pain points in fashion, inclusivity and diversity, sustainability, and for us it was about building a business that actually not only talks about those pain points, but actually builds a new system and introduces new ways to work in the fashion industry that doesn't, just use tick boxes. So a third of all our projects are philanthropic. Diversity and inclusion is at the heart of what we do. We can drop some stats about sustainability in our work, but currently we don't work with anyone who doesn't have the same ethos, and that's quite an amazing position to be in.
So when I did first start digital fashion ages ago, this is one of the first animations that I made. And it just went crazy. Dazed magazine picked it up, and then I think it was the first time that the fashion audience saw like the gaming industry and was like, oh, that's like perfect fusion of like the two together, and obviously very sustainable. And then like brands like Nike and Adidas were getting all of the digital assets into their manufacturing systems. Yeah.
And for me, when I first saw this back in that time, it was at that point there was a lot of talk about like omni-channel and what it meant for the fashion industry to be physical and digital, but it was much more about e-com really. And so when I saw this, it was like I actually saw fabric and I saw flesh, and I mean, you don't very often see breasts and hips in a fashion image, and it was just magnificent at that point, and I was just obsessed by the fact that in a way it was saying more than a lot of the catwalks or any of the campaigns that I'd seen in fashion, because you can also see the materiality of the fabric. And that's what's really exciting about the softwares that are available nowadays, is you can actually effectively, it's garment simulation. So if we're talking about the positives and sustainability, there's £7 billion spent on just sampling alone. And the fact that in a click of a button, you can actually see something in a leather, in a silk. And if you think about the systems that would needed to be in place to speak to the factories, all of the minimum orders, it just means it actually shortcuts a lot of the work for the creatives. A lot of people feel that digital is, there's a push button, and you can all make it happen for you in an instance, and it's almost like very robotic, but we see it as a space which is much more creative, and it actually gives a lot more onus and freedom and time to the designers at that point of creative incubation, because you can actually freely look through what your design will look like in multiple fabrics. So this is some of the people that we work with, and the fact that we do work not just in fashion, but within art, culture, fashion, and tech. We've got a show currently on at the Barbican. We work also within education, so we've got an IRL, URL academy. But yeah, you can see some of the brands that we work with, and we're really proud to have something like 𝗏𝗶𝗃𝗲, which is a queer, the first trans Nike strip club in London, alongside Prada and Lexus. And I think it really shows the diversity of our work, but also the fact that we really care about not only innovating the industry, but actually bringing a more honest conversation about specifically gender politics, but also about diversity and inclusion and our discourse. Again, we built our business based on these principles. It's not something we added at the end. And all of our work and all of the projects that we deliver have these written within them. And because of this, we found a lot of the work is actually, when we start working with the brand, we feel like there's actually more questions than we can give answers for. So we spend a lot of time listening. And then at that point, we've actually done 2 white papers now. Our last one on the metaverse and diversity inclusion went live with Vogue Business as an exclusive, because there was loads of questions that we didn't have answers to. So we now can bring data and analytics to the the problems that we see and bring them to brands and be like, okay, well, here are some of the answers and key information points about the metaverse and where your brand should be touching. So yeah, I mean, if we go back to the key point, which is about the metaverse, everyone's like, is it here to stay? What does it mean? Because currently it just looks like a bit of a shit video game. Is that the future of fashion reduced down to a pixel where you can see none of the craft and artisan or none of the elegance of the work that's so much time has gone into it? So 4.5 billion was raised in the week following Facebook pivoted to Meta. Right now, the metaverse that we see and know, Decentraland, Sandbox, they're not there yet. And we 100% believe that actually the future is the IRL and URL working together in unison, and that is augmented reality. And here's some of our work. So this introduces to effectively a menu of what we do. And we're not a jack of all trades. Instead, we know and are aware that the future of our industry is about the smooth application of workflow. So we have experts and expertise in all of these different layers, because having one asset, say a digital file that your design team have worked within, and then if you want to make that into an NFT or put it into one of those terrible video games like Decentraland, then how do you do that? So we basically work 360, so it means that your product and your assets can be agile and move through all of those with ease, because that is one of the big pain points right now. There's a nice little quote about us.
All of these visuals are ours, by the way, as well. So this is a project that launched in the midst of COVID, and we were thinking about all the projects that we'd worked on, and we hadn't worked on something that was London-based and helping our community, and we knew that Brexit was also happening at the same time, so a lot of people were struggling to think even about how to do a show. So we worked with the cult store Machine A, and we actually built their store in AR, and worked with different designers from Richard Quinn, who else? Martine Rose, Pierre Gotterson. And instead of actually showing their final pieces, some of them showed final pieces, but a lot of them were just fabric samples. And then when you clicked on the box, they actually shared what they thought the future of fashion would be. So it was more of a conversation piece. A lot of the designers just wanted to talk about the future of fashion. And we fit all of that work into 4 megabytes, which was a filter on Instagram. And we wanted it to be on Instagram so that it was shareable and accessible to everyone. And then we also put QR codes all around London so that anyone could scan and then be involved in this fashion moment. It was cute.
And I think because it just democratized the whole of the Fashion Week experience. You had people on the 55 bus scanning a giant billboard, which is not normally occupied by lots of big, beautiful, wide-teeth, smiled women with handbags, and instead there was a big poster inviting you to be part of the discourse on the future of fashion. So people were it was quite ominous. So people were scanning it, and all of a sudden inside a store that was closed because of COVID, because of Brexit. And it meant that this dialogue, all of the designers that were, effectively everyone was a part of it. And as Katy was saying, each of these little plinths, they had this really quite poetic conversation from the designers questioning fashion. And for us, we were like, this is such a big moment. We've given them the opportunity to create digital fashion for them, create this augmented world, and instead, they just wanted to talk about what's the point. And I think that's because we're in this seminal moment where the future of fashion is in question, and we really do believe it's digital, but actually the digital and physical working together, firstly because of the sustainability pluses. If 1% of every product that's of physical fashion that's produced could pivot to digital, then we would save the same amount of the carbon footprint that Denmark delivers every year. So if you think about like statistics like that, that's just 1%. That's a hell of a lot of an impact on the industry and on our environment. And going back to the conversation on sampling, even for a designer having their work in a store, it takes a lot. And the strain isn't just on the environment, but also we talk about sustainability very much 360. How is the fashion industry and a career within it sustainable? It's largely the emerging designers are drowning because it's a financial drain, not only a drain on our planet, but a financial drain. So there are all the things that we really, I suppose, incubate our work within. So this is another, so we've got 7 industry worlds first now. The first one we just introduced, so it was the first ever augmented shoppable boutique. This one was London Fashion Week announced that they were digital, so we were really excited about this. We're like chatting to Caroline Rush, oh my God, you're going digital, this is it, babes. And then it was a website, and we were largely let down. We're like, wow, Caroline, great. Anyway, we're going to do our own thing. So we basically launched, and again, philanthropically, so we gave 277,000 last year to emerging designers and support, which is a lot for a SME, but we care. So this was the first time ever a digital fashion, so they're a couture digital fashion house, but they don't make anything physically. They're called Ouroboros. And they were showcasing on Fashion Week on their website. And we were like, this is really exciting, but it's flat and it's on a website and no one will get it. It looks like an Instagram post, basically. So we were like, let's make it wearable. So again, we took over all the billboards around London and made this QR code activated moment where, again, amidst COVID, everyone was can only meet up in groups of 7, face masks. And we organised these small events. And we had, you can see here some of the people wearing it. But the really beautiful thing, I think, is that for a second, digital fashion was delivering something which was live and physical, which was like, everyone was so like, wow, okay, because digital fashion was seen as this kind of tech activation that lived inside the metaverse, but we were bringing it into our physical space. And it was such a monumental moment because people were dancing in the streets in digital fashion. And it felt like a big moment. And The Guardian wrote about it. And that's when my dad was like, all right, babes, The Guardian, yeah. And then we sent them Forbes and they were even more excited. But, you know, everyone started to look and really understand what digital fashion means and the power of it and the opportunity. You can see here a little video of the kind of walkthrough through all the billboards. But again, if we're going back to sustainability and talking about, you know, the fact that you can try on fashion in your home without the embarrassment of those awkward mirrors and terrible lights, but you can try it on in your home, in the comfort of your own home, and you can actually play, you can customize, and you can try before you buy. We did a project with PE Nation, and it was in the middle of lockdown, and it was selling snow, like wear for the slopes, and we were like, it's summer. Like, this is like, no one's gonna like be buying stuff for the slopes because no one can even travel. But it got a 96% sell-through from our digital try-on. And that's, again, we were surprised ourselves there. We're like, oh, that's, wow. But if you think about the physical sampling, you know, no one was going to the stores. Nothing was in stores because all the stores were shut. So we were bringing it into their homes. And there's a few brands now, Canada Goose, for instance, they're not creating any samples. So effectively, from production all the way through to the shoot and campaign, there's not one physical item made. The first time a physical item's made is when it's in the stores, in retail. And it was such a cost for their company that they'd saved. And it's when you really get into the detail of it, of how much spending goes on at that point, and also waste. It's really remarkable. And again, I think we weren't aware of how much time and energy and finance it takes to even get through that sampling stage. And it also does show effectively how bloody good the softwares are and the 3D realization, and the fact that they don't have to sample anything physically. So all the campaigns you'll see are digital fashion. And I think this is a proof point here. Like, does anyone care about digital fashion? We got 1.5 million wears in the first 3 hours. And for us, that was like, okay, people aren't just playing, people are intrigued and they want to be a part of this. And also as well, the fact that from these QR codes in London, it was only 30% of the engagement was from London and the wares. I mean, it was a global activation, and the power of that, again, for a brand to have your product in the hands and homes of new audiences, of new followers, of your current followers, it just means that your reach is just magnified massively. You want to chat about this one?
Yeah, so we worked with Richard Quinn for this one and got inside his brain and said, if you're going to do a fashion show digitally, what would it look like? And obviously, we've got bright pink sky, we've got blue grass, green grass, which you would just never be able to do in the physical world. And to have a show there will probably cost so much. You'd have to fly people out to this place, for example. So it was really good. And again, this was in Instagram as well. So it was all of this crunched down into 4 megabytes, which was a lot of work, but very worth it.
Yeah, and as Kathy was saying, like, for a designer to have to build all of this environment, it became more about the world of Richard Quinn and not just the product. And there's a massive piece that's missing from when a brand communicates, their messages and their narrative at Fashion Weeks. You have all the kind of spectacular, again, which costs a lot. Again, what happens after that fit. I know in the UK, British Fashion Council do lots of collaborations with the universities so that they can have the boards and some of the build products, but it's still not enough. And the fact that we could effectively build the world of Richard Quinn and everyone could not only walk through it, but experience it. And for Richard, that was just such a moment, because this is the world that he'd been imagining when he designed his collection, but was only in the mood boards. And unless you're a journalist, you don't have the opportunity to see those mood boards. So it was a really fun project. Oh, this is another good one.
So this was, basically we wanted to get more people wearing digital fashion and engaging with it, and we knew that digital fashion hadn't been on the red carpet yet. So myself and Leanne were, what do you call it when you're hosts?
We were like Vogue Singapore.
Yeah, we were hosts for Vogue Singapore. So this is Kristen McMenemy. She came over and spoke to us, and we asked her, what do you think about digital fashion? Some people knew what it was, some people had no idea. And then we were like, do you want to get dressed in it? So you see her up there, dressed in it. And this went crazy. All of the Vogues wrote about it, and this was actually published in the print magazine, which was really cute. And then the next page, we decided to sell it as our first NFT, which sold out in 24 minutes.
It was, and I think for that as well, this was another world first. It was because effectively everyone was talking about meta. They were like, oh my God, what is the metaverse? And our whole thing, I suppose, positioning is that it isn't about metaverses, but it's about this collective experience that is digital and the power of that, and not getting lost into this idea that we just need to jump into a metaverse, even though we do work with multiple metaverses. So just having it on the red carpet and having people interact with it, it became like this historic moment, specifically because when we're talking about digital fashion, we're not only talking about creating something as a twin, which has lots of benefits, again, for the production cycle, but also what is the opportunity and potential. So this garment fits any race, any gender, any body size. There's none of those conflicting narratives that fashion incubates, where you have to choose who you are. This is modular. You can click through, you can customize in different colors, but it just means that you can be the version that you are on that day and wear it and collaborate with it and change it. And that, I think, is the power of digital fashion, in the fact that with a click of a button, you can actually change who you are on that day. Yeah, and it was such an iconic moment when our NFT sold out, because we had multiple projects on, and I actually was texting Nicholas, and I was like, oh my God, they've all gone. They've all gone. Nicholas is over there, there's my pal, by the way. But it was so crazy, the fact that everyone was just really excited about that and appreciated that it was quite an historic moment. This is our latest Fashion Week project with the phenomenal Roxanda. And this was just such a dream. Firstly, I mean, this got so much press, primarily because what we did was very disruptive. I'm not using that word in an eye-rolling way, because we always eye-roll when anyone talks about disruption. But we basically, we wanted to bring the fashion community into the NFT space. Crypto and fashion is like oil and water. They don't mix very well, particularly because your beautiful garments are crushed down to the tiny pixel. So it's not about the ephemeral qualities of fashion. So what we did, instead of hosting it on a marketplace, which I don't know if you've spent any time on an NFT marketplace, but your beautiful work could be next to like a vomiting trainer and a rock. And it's like, okay, where does my brand fit in this? So the disruptive thing we did, we sold an NFT in pounds, not crypto, and on Roxanda's website. We got so much hate from the crypto community. They weren't angry, they were really angry. They couldn't believe that we were spoiling the little consortium of just elitism of all those cis white bros flipping NFTs. And basically, it was so well received, because you could effectively buy an NFT like you can a bag or a Roxanda garment. And the beauty of this as well is that we worked atelier to atelier with Roxanda. What can't you do with fabrication in the physical world that you would like to do? And Roxanda's trained as architect. As you know, her work's all about sculpture and pattern. She's an artist. The show was at the Tate Britain. So the closing garment of the show, which is always the most major, we took that and we worked with Roxanda until the early hours over many months. And Roxanda, has he got the final one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, here we go. Roxanda wanted the fabric to move and to grow and to migrate around the dress and change. She wanted the viewer to be able to customize and experience. That, if that was physical production, would be an absolute nightmare. It's couture, it would be a nightmare. So all of a sudden, we were just making Roxanda's dreams come true. But it was at the show, so we showed it at the show in AR. So within the Tate Britain, you saw the NFT, and then closing of the show, it went on set. Oh no, I've gone too far.
Can you go back?
Can I go back?
This one takes a minute.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So basically, you could buy this NFT. And again, going back to democratizing the industry, we started at £25. That was the entry point, because we wanted everyone to be able to be a part of this moment. And then £5,000 was the most expensive. And that one, it was the file. So it meant that effectively that garment, that NFT, could go into any metaverse, because we gave you the whole file. Forbes went mad over that. They were like, wow, this is the future of NFTs. They need to have utility. Then no one will be talking about the fact they're just a JPEG. So that was yeah, it was a really exciting project. And this one, I mean, this was months and months and months of work.
Yeah, so for this one, we worked with 𝗬𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃 Atelier, and we actually showed at Paris Haute Couture. And if you go on to the next page, this is, because I know it'll take a little while to load. This is a garment that we worked on, and usually in 3D you work with a lot of textures that emulate something that is happening, whereas with this, all of this is geometry, and it took us so long to build. But from this scene, it's in like a crystal cave.
4.5 months.
Yeah, we really wanted all of the light to actually bounce and flicker off all of the gemstones like it would in real life, and to do that, we had to build every single one. And we were talking like every single day on Zoom, and they would give us like the tiniest little like scrutiny of like, change that facet to be slightly like that. But it paid off, and it was, yeah, quite wild.
And this is at a time when they couldn't work with their atelier. They didn't have an atelier because nobody could work in the middle of COVID. So they came to us as a solution. And I don't think we even realized at that point that this 4.5 month slog would be as intense as it was. As Cathy said, every single gem was questioned, and there was over 1 million just on the front piece, and they're all sculpted effectively. So when anyone talks about like digital being a quick fix, we actually interrupt that and say, you know, it's actually about craftsmanship and artisan. And that's what we talk about a lot at IDF, is the parallels between the physical and the digital world, and the fact that there's layers of expertise and artisan in all of this work, and there is no push button. And again, the fact that all of this was made on Zoom, really. Like, no one flew around the world, and they were giving us all of the statistics of how many times they would fly to meet their embroidery team in 7 different countries. We were like, okay, that is insane. Yeah, it was such a wonderful project. And we've got 6 industry world firsts. This was one of them, and the Roxander. So, I mean, in conclusion, that's us. We care about the planet, we care about the future of our industry, and yeah, we're really excited about where the future of our industry is going, and hopefully it can not occupy all the pain points it does currently. So it's exciting to be here talking about sustainability, but also introducing you to us and our work. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I hope you've been inspired by the talks, and looking forward to you all being part of the movement around sustainability. So, yeah, it's lunchtime now, guys. Thanks a lot.